Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Unlocked Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. This is Michael Cross, your host, and I hope that the following program you'll find intellectually stimulating and maybe something that will benefit you. Well, we'll see. Let's take a look at the topic today that I'd like to deal with. And what I'd like to talk about is trees. No, not the thing about, how to grow a tree or how to prune a tree. That's something that you'll have to go to some of those extension shows that often are on Saturday mornings in the U.S. No, the thing I'd like to talk about is the symbolism, first of all, of the tree of life, and then get into the idea of, why I think our culture, and maybe the people in various subcultures in today's society, maybe the reason why there's a lot of unhappiness, a lot of disconnect, a lot of feeling of alienation, and people trying to substitute things like alcohol and drugs and consumerism and celebrity worship, that includes sports worship, and other things that really don't really matter in the long run. Okay? They're trying to find something to satisfy that craving, what Carl Jung called an archetypal craving that we have to connect to our past. And I will note that if we don't learn to better connect to our past and where we came from, we're going to really lose sight of who we are, the values that have brought us here, and ultimately maybe it would endanger whether, we as a group or we as individuals within a family will continue into the future. Now, I said I'd like to say something about the symbolism, and again, this is going to sound really esoteric, okay? But it's going to have a little bit of psychology and, esoteric thought and stuff thrown in, because, we're kind of dealing with a Jungian theme. Now, the tree of life. I'd encourage people to look it up. It's a very enduring symbol that you'll find all over the world and throughout ancient cultures. You find it in Sumeria, very interesting depictions of the tree of life. You find it in the Nordic religions, the ancient ones, Hebrew or Judean tradition, very strong there. In fact, takes on different meanings if you go into Kabbalistic studies and so forth. You have it in ancient Aztec depictions. And in all of these depictions, I could continue going on and on because, it's all over the world. In all of these depictions, it usually means the same thing. It's an origin or the creation of the human family, the human society, and it branches out from a focal point, just as a tree would do. So this is why it's been a very enduring archetypical symbol. And so you could show this symbol to people in all these ancient cultures, and they would know what you were talking about essentially. However, if you look at it in today's culture, unless I guess you're a member of the Mormon Church, which is a very central theme, the metaphor of the tree of life, and maybe Jewish culture, most people have no idea what it is. They'd look at it and think, okay, it's a nice drawing of a tree. And that's really a shame because we really have lost a sense of where we're rooted and who we are. And again, this is not meant for one group or another. I don't care. I mean, I got people of all kinds. When I look at my internet tracker and so forth, there's listeners that all over the world. I actually I have people that listen to the show in China. I have people in Africa and Middle East and all over the place. So it doesn't matter. This is directed at everybody. Okay? Everyone has a reason to be proud of their culture and to want to preserve it. All right? Now, I will say this. We have one scripture. This is the only Bible scripture I'm actually going to quote here. In Job 18:16, there's a quote. His roots are dried below, and his branches cut off above. Memory of him perishes from the earth, and he has no name abroad. This is a description not only of what happens to the wicked, but it also has the esoteric meaning that people who support this kind of, they go into wickedness, often it means it goes into selfishness. I mean, we can look at the ancient Romans, the ancient Greeks, the elite. Their number one problem was not so much their decadence, but the fact they turned away from the family ideal. And they just started, kind of dying out, just like it says here. Now, this can apply to people that just say, I'm just not going to have kids. I don't believe in having kids. I don't want to be bothered with it. Well, in a sense, you're not going to be remembered in the future, okay? All right? You pick up a history book, it has a few hundred names in it. Most people out there are not going to be in the history books in the future. Okay? So the idea that there's something that's enduring of your legacy if you don't pass on your family genes, so to speak, is, well, it's kind of delusional. Of course, I'm going to get into nihilism in just a moment. But anyway, think about that, though. And there'd be no name abroad, and you'd be perished from the earth. There's a lot of ancient civilizations. You don't even know about them unless you do crack an old history book and look and go, wow, that's an interesting civilization. It doesn't exist anymore. And in fact, none of the people from that civilization exist anymore. So, there's cases of that. So it's kind of like, okay, it's a trivial thing. Maybe you get some question on a game show. It's kind of sad, really. Anyway, we take a look at the Ten Commandments. I guess I lied. One more scripture. So that's one of the Ten Commandments there. Thou shalt not lie. But anyway, that's a third one. Oh, I should go on here. Exodus 20:12. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord God giveth thee. I think honoring your father and your mother, it goes beyond just, hey, Dad, you're a great guy, or hey, Mom, you're a great woman. It goes into the traditions they have passed on to you. Okay? I think that's ultimately what that scripture means. And a people who, just like in Job, the ones that just kind of say, I don't care where I come from, this is me, and I'm going to live life for the present, and, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow I shall die. The thing is that the reason why I think this applies as in a cultural context is, again, we take a look at modern society where people just kind of don't value where they come from anymore. And I've noticed people that really study their family history, stuff like that, they tend to, when they're younger, they tend to be more into the idea of, someday my kids, I'm going to pass this down to them, and I'm going to give them this information and so forth. And people that don't, they just kind of like have no sense whatsoever of their family traditions. They often are like, well, if I have kids, and if I pass it down. And I think ultimately this goes beyond just the whole idea of whether you're going to have kids or not. I think this goes into, mental health and all these other things. Well, anyway, let's go on. Well, one last thing here. This isn't from the Bible. This is from an individual named Marcus Garvey. He was a Jamaican entrepreneur and civil rights leader. It's one of the main inspirations for Rastafarianism and a lot of the African American civil rights leaders. And I think this applies to, like I said, whatever race, whatever ethnicity. And it says, a people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Okay? Again, that goes into that whole idea of the tree of life. Let's just saw it down there. You got to know where you come from to know where you're going. Okay? So, anyway. Now, getting into this a little deeper. Psychologist Carl Jung coined the phrase, the collective unconsciousness has to do with archetypes that connect us to our ancestors. You see, he believed our unconscious mind, there was two parts to it. One was the part in which we have memories. It could be good memories, bad memories, good feelings, those kinds of things. That's in our unconscious. It drives us. It actually directs a lot of our life. The psychoanalytic school of thought says that most of what's going on in our life and the way we see life is actually directed by our subconscious. We don't even know where these things come from. Okay? All right? Marketers know all about this stuff. That's why Edward Bernays, he borrowed his uncle's book on psychoanalysis. His uncle was Sigmund Freud, and he found out how he could sell stuff to people without them even knowing it. And he was the father of modern advertising. Well, anyway, Carl Jung took a different approach than his colleague Sigmund Freud's nephew did. And, he wrote a lot of really good stuff. I found this quote that I want to read you from. You can find it at jung.org under the title The Symbolic Life. Okay? It says, you see, man is in need of a symbolic life, badly in need. We only live banal, ordinary, rational, or irrational things. But we have no symbolic life. Where do we live symbolically? Nowhere except where we participate in the ritual of life. Have you got a corner somewhere in your house where you perform the rites as you can see in India? Even the very simple houses there have at least a curtained corner where the members of the household can perform the symbolic life, where they can make their new vows or their meditation. We don't have it. We have no such corner. We have our own room, of course, but there is a telephone that can ring us up at any time. And we always must be ready. We have no time, no place. We have no symbolic life, and we are all badly in need of the symbolic life. Only the symbolic life can express the need of the soul, the daily need of the soul, mind you. And because people have no such thing, they can never step out of this mill, this awful, banal, grinding life in which they are nothing but. Everything is banal. Everything is nothing but. And that is the reason why people are neurotic. They are simply sick of the whole thing, sick of that banal life, and therefore they want sensation. They want a war. They all want a war. They are all glad when there is a war. They say, thank heaven, now something is going to happen, something bigger than ourselves. This has actually gotten only worse since Jung wrote this. Now, he doesn't mean a symbolic life, like you can go in and spend a bunch of time on the computer playing a computer game, or have an avatar on one of these virtual living type sites. He means a symbolic life where you actually get into your brain and connect to higher powers, higher thoughts, higher meanings. Now, the thing he said about having a phone nearby, you got to remember when he did this, it was just that you had a phone, a wire phone that was connected, probably sitting, connected to the wall or sitting on a table. And he felt, well, you're always on call. And now think about what we do. We have people don't even buy alarm clocks anymore because they have their cell phone. They put it next to their bed. I've heard some bad things about doing that, yet I'm kind of guilty of it myself. But the thing is that we're not just on call. We are all connected. I mean, we get on social media. Has someone said something interesting? Most people can't sit and watch a movie on TV or anything without having their cell phone in their lap, kind of watching the movie, watching the cell phone, playing a game. Oh my gosh, what's Justin Bieber or Kim Kardashian doing this week? And there's no downtime really for a lot of people. And then he says that this is causing neurosis because everything's just get up, go to work, come home, go on TV, go on this, go watch your social media, that sort of thing. And ultimately, people just want some sort of sensation. They want to connect. They want to have something that feels real. So maybe that's why, news programs always show devastation and wars and remote things happening, because this is a reality in a sense. This is where things happen that are unexpected in the world. I remember a science fiction show that played a few years ago. I can't remember the name though. And about this guy who's like a hotel owner, and there's this really weird guests that come in, and he finds one of their passports, and then he's really into history. He and his kid, they study history, lots and lots and lots. And he notices all the dates are for when disasters took place that are stamped on the passport. And he's like, what the heck is this all about? He figures out there's a disaster about to take place. These guys are time travelers. They're from the future where everything is so perfect that they just desire to come and see devastation because they need something real. And the thing is, whereas we're not in a perfect state yet. I mean, we don't have that whole Ray Kurzweil thing where we can download ourselves into a computer and live forever, or some of these other ideas that we can, get a synthetic body and never have illness and always have perfect health and eternal youth. We're not there yet, although I wouldn't doubt if we don't get there. The thing is, essentially, we do need to try to get back maybe a little bit of connection to our past before we do start venturing into this brave new world, so to speak, especially as we go into areas that, well, at least in recorded history, we've never been before. Who knows what was going on in Noah's day? There's some interesting stuff in various apocrypha that would indicate that maybe they had some interesting technology that we don't even have. But anyway, let's just kind of go on here. Now, the thing is, like I said before, consumerism, alcohol, corporate sports, social media, celebrity, gossip, those things can't satisfy what it is to be human. They actually, in my opinion, only intensify it. It's kind of like you taste something that just whets your appetite, but it's not enough to really satisfy it. Now, many people today have no true connection to concepts larger than them. They're seeking them in artificial places, but maybe this is why, when you do ask a lot of people about family, they just say, well, nah, I'm not going to have kids. What difference does it make anyway? See, this is a symptom of nihilism, and it's nothing new. But in the past, it was usually confined to spoiled rich kids in the 19th century, for instance. Now it's infecting an ever-increasing percentage of the regular population, since we're all so interconnected. Okay, so it's not a situation now where a very, very tiny group of people who happen to like a certain philosophy or something get together and they kind of take existentialism to the extreme, and pretty soon, nothing really matters. And, that leads to a lot of depression and worse. But now we have a situation where it's kind of out there all over the place. Of course, corporate America is willing to give you substitutes, for all of these things, but it doesn't satisfy. Now, one of the things I would say is one of the best things people can do nowadays is try to connect more to the simple and get out of the artificial. Carl Jung was talking about people just being in their houses and, their phones sitting there. It can call them any time. And there's no real meaning. I just thought about the idea that, in Japan, where they had confined living spaces, many of the people still traditionally did and still do have little tiny gardens. This was their way of still connecting to nature. It wasn't so much that they were beautiful, although in many cases they were and are. It was a way to feel that you were still part of the bond with creation. Okay? Because when you compare walls in our house, I don't care how well you decorate it, it's not like nature. Okay? It doesn't give you the same feeling. But at least if you have a little garden or something, it can give you something. But I think, most people live where they can actually go out and experience nature. This is connectiveness. And one of the things I just thought of, you can connect to your ancestors in nature. if you're hiking deep in the woods or strolling along the coast, or if you live in the desert, you're out hiking a desert trail, you're seeing life if it's, unspoiled and hasn't really been, messed with or developed. You're seeing life as people saw it hundreds of years ago. Okay, if you're fortunate enough to live near like an old growth forest or something like that, you can walk through there and realize those trees were already big when George Washington was allegedly cutting down his father's cherry tree. Okay? The thing is that these were trees that maybe ancient American Indians, walked by or sat by or had their campfire by or something. And that is pretty special. Or if you're on the coast. I was traveling in Europe in this one area, and there was a quarry along the coastline, and there was a sign, that it had long since been abandoned. It sort of looked like the quarry scene in the movie Noah, where he comes across an area where there's machinery and stuff, but it's kind of rusty and no one's using it anymore. And I came across a spot like that, and there was a historical plaque, and it was explaining what people used to do 100 years ago when they worked there. And man, I was thinking, this is the area where people lived and worked, and there was a thriving community there. It's not there anymore, but there used to be. That's connection to your past. That's what I think. Taking a kid to go see something like that is way better than taking them to some sort of theme park or something. It's something where you have a feel. Maybe feel the ghost of ancient peoples in these regions. Okay? And speaking of like ghosts and spirituality and stuff like that, I remember I was with a group of people, and we were hiking a trail in Utah's Wasatch Front. And there was a whole bunch of mountains. I think it was Mount Timpanogos was there. And this guy was from Iraq. And he looked around at the mountains, and he actually asked the question, how could anyone ever be an atheist when surrounded by mountains like that? You see, I think what he was touching on was the fact that there's a sense when you're in nature and in these kinds of settings, there's you can sense the spirituality or magic when you're surrounded by the untouched and unmodified nature. I try to include that in my Freedom from Conscience books, to give the readers a shared experience with the heroine. And, you try to describe how a person would be thinking when they're out in nature and away from it all and so forth. And, it is so, I've just been in a situation where I've been like, you're sitting next to a creek, and, it's so much more marvelous to watch the dynamics there than it is to sit in front of a TV or something. Well, anyway, I gotta go on here. And, it's been found that nature, there's an article in let me see here, I want to cite this correctly. It's about spending time in nature. Yeah, it's titled, it's from June 3rd, 2010. It's from the University of Rochester. And it's called Spending Time in Nature Makes People Feel More Alive, Study Shows. And there's a quote in there. You can go to the site and check it out. It's a really good article. Nature is fuel for the soul, says Richard Ryan, lead author and a professor of psychology at the University of Rochester. Often when we feel depleted, we reach for a cup of coffee. But research suggests a better way to get energized is to connect with nature. Wow. Yeah. And, when you're in nature, you have again, I'm going to say, there is a sense of spirituality and or magic that can flow into you. And you're where, a leaf on a plant is infinitely more complex and marvelous, a work of creation, than the most fancy office building. And essentially our office buildings and stuff, even our houses for that matter, are just extensions of office buildings are like artificial mountains with caves in them. And our homes are often, well, if you live in apartments, sort of the same thing. And our homes, home, a hut, whatever. But still is so artificial compared to just being outside and examine. What was it, Thoreau, who made comments about looking at ant hills for hours, and marveling at them and at the organization. You could learn a lot by looking at just an ant hill. How many kids do that nowadays? Not that many. How many go out and play in the creek anymore? Oh, it's probably going to neighbors call the cops, Oh, well, he could trip and fall and drown in this creek that's like 3 inches deep or something, or he might get bitten by something, or who knows what. We're too scared to live anymore, too scared to let our kids live. But anyway, what I'd like to say is this. Maybe the way that we could have a healthier society and feel better about ourselves, and maybe a better future, certainly one where we have more of a sense of connection, where we do have the root, which would be our ancestry, the present, where we're at now, like the trunk, and the branches going out. Maybe, our kids or our future kids or grandkids. Maybe the one thing we should do is, if you have traditions that make you and your family unique, then keep them. If you grew up in a sterile, secular, plastic environment, then be like Abraham. Be the first to establish a new set of traditions and pass those on to your kids. Become aware of who you are and that you are unique and special. Society wants to pigeonhole you. Remember that. Society wants you to be a perfect consumer demographic, to be able to be coached, to be able to be manipulated, to be able to be sold to. Resist that. Connect to nature, connect to the powers and symbols, and try to live as a unique human being. Resist this Borg-like, if you remember Star Trek, demand that you assimilate. That seems to be, I don't know what it is. I think it's part of our legacy that when we lived in tribes, that you wanted everyone to kind of be on the same page. And now that we've grown into mega societies, we still have that feeling that we want everyone to fit on the same page. That's why, to a large degree, our media is designed to get us to conform to certain ideals. We're propagandized all the time by our media. Face it. Look it up. Look up Pentagon/movies and influence. Look up CIA literature and movies and this kind of thing. And you'll find that there's a lot of influence that goes on behind the scenes. But, the corporations, the what we usually title the powers that be, really do want us to conform. They want us to kind of be, and think about what they want. Think about what the ideal citizen is in their mind. Just give it some thought. Think about what their ideal citizen is. You might, if you give it some thought, you can go out in nature and think about that one, where you can really contemplate. It's not someone that looks up in the sky and watches meteorites or looks and marvels at the universe. That's not what really society's looking for. They're looking for people that'll fill up malls and spend, and then go to work and make more money, and then go back to the mall and spend, and then go to work and make more money, and then go back to the mall and spend. And you know what? If ideas like marriage and family and stuff like that get in the way, forget them. Go back to the mall and spend. Have more money to spend. That seems to be the ideal citizen in today's society. Anyway, one thing I want to say, though, in closing, running out of time here, even if you're not particularly proud of your family, try to do some genealogy. And, I think everyone's bound to discover some really interesting people back there. And keep in mind that you are the latest link in the grand chain of this life. You can change things if you want to change them. If your family is all crazy or something or weird. But try to find, if you do this, I'm sure you'll find someone back there that you really relate to. Okay? It might be your great-grandparent or something. You're going, whoa, I had no idea she did this or he did that. And then you'll be like, well, maybe I do come from a really awesome family. If you're adopted, you got your adopted family. Or look at your culture. Find out what your culture. Go check your DNA if you don't know where you're adopted from. And find out what region you're from. Establish some traditions around that. And, just keep that in mind. And I think that'll add meaning to your life and encourage you to pass this heritage on to your kids and allow a greater sense. And I think ultimately this will allow you to have a greater sense of your own importance. I'm not saying everyone should go around like, totally egotistical and narcissistic and stuff like that. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that our culture promotes an empty narcissism, a narcissism that has to be filled on acceptance for what you own, what you wear, what designer this or that you have, and if you're doing all of the things that's expected of your particular social standing. Okay? That's empty narcissism, as opposed to, we've talked about full-fledged narcissists. They're a different breed than that. Our society's narcissistic wannabes. That's what the society promotes because that is what you make money off of. If everyone lived simplistically, our economy would collapse, wouldn't it? But the thing is that if you want a sense of your true importance, sometimes you have to try to see yourself from the perspective of you are an entity that was created as part of a family. You're part of a creation around you, which is pretty big and awesome, when you contemplate that. And then when you look out, you can be out in the woods and think, whoa, this is these big mountains and trees and whatever. And then you look up in the sky and then you see, the marvels of the universe. And, that it goes on forever, okay? And sometimes in your humility, you gain a sense of your true importance when you consider your uniqueness as well. Anyway, these are just a few things, and just trying to maybe tap into a little bit of that Jungian thought there, and really encouraging people to, try to think a little deeper, a little bit more esoteric, and tap into that collective unconsciousness. There is a sense of power I think you will gain. So anyway, what I want to deal with right now is the issue of, what I'm going to call agenda setting versus conspiracy. Okay? And a lot of times when you question the dominant paradigm out there, you bring up news that is, from news stories that are really different from what's going on in the mainstream media, or a perspective that's really different than what you would see in the mainstream media. You often have people that will, this is true for both the right wing and the left wing, will say that you're part of some sort of conspiracy theory sort of mindset. And, it's thrown at people from the right who might bring up issues that are uncomfortable with the left, and vice versa. I mean, Hillary Clinton was very famous in the 1990s for talking about the vast right-wing conspiracy that was out to get her and her husband. And so really, ultimately, a conspiracy really just means you've got a group of people that are planning something from behind the scenes. I mean, technically an ad campaign designed to get people to buy more fruit juice or something could be considered a conspiracy. A campaign by a church to get more people to join their church could be part of a conspiracy sense. I think ultimately just about every religion would like to see the world all agree with their religion. Of course, you have some religions that are a little bit more hostile to the unbelievers than others. Ultimately, most people, if you're a Baptist, you'd love it if everyone was Baptist. If you're Catholic, you'd like it if everyone was Catholic. And, of course, they have their various missionary programs or programs to reach out to the community. And, no one really calls that a conspiracy, but by definition it would be. Now, the thing is, though, I don't really want to go into the whole idea of where this word even comes from in modern politics, But I'd like to deal with the difference between agenda setting and conspiracy, and dealing with even social class and so forth, in such a way that maybe you could see that it's not necessarily something where maybe there is, I don't know, but in many cases, news stories that seem to be prominent in the media, I don't think it's necessarily a group of guys like in the X-Files where they all sit around in that little room, the several people that controlled all the conspiracies taking place, and deciding what football team's going to win the Super Bowl or something like that. Okay? But I think it has a lot more to do with agenda setting and social class differences, especially in the United States, which, oh my gosh, social classes are really prominent in America. No matter how much Americans try to say they don't, I think it's a very stratified society. If you get a chance, look on YouTube. A very good documentary that was done called People Like Us. To get to the videos themselves, you have to type in People Like Us, social classes in America. Otherwise, I think there's some like music videos or there was a movie with that name and stuff. So you have to type in the full thing, People Like Us, social classes in America. But really, there is a huge difference in the way people talk, the way people even stand close to one another, depending on your social class. Now, the thing is this. What inspired me on this particular topic was someone posted something on my Facebook, and it was an excerpt from the New York Times. There was an article August 17th, 2015, and it's called Mormon Leader Joseph Smith's 34 Wives Inspire Utah Artist. And it's a fairly large article if you look it up. I mean, to me, this seemed more like something I would see in a local newspaper. Okay, something in the community section of the local newspaper, not something in the New York Times. I mean, the New York Times is supposed to be and have an international clientele and focus, and you're talking about someone who drew some, probably a very talented artist who drew some pictures of the women who I guess were supposed to have been married in one way or another to Joseph Smith. Now, the thing is, on a worldwide basis, I mean, Mormons are like 15, 16 million people. And so it seems like it'd be mostly interesting to, Mormons, or maybe a few people that have some sort of interest in Mormons. But a very, very limited number of people, it seems, would be really interested in this. But yet, it's a pretty, substantial article there. And I was just thinking, there's so many, right now, everyone that's listening to this can think of a whole bunch of issues that you're thinking, well, why doesn't the mainstream media cover this, or this, or this, or this, or this? Okay? Because we often, I think there's one thing that's really frustrating for people is when, you're really concerned about, for instance, the troubles going on in Ukraine and maybe what the real reasons are. If you go into detail, not just what you'll hear from, I don't know, John McCain. He's a credible source, isn't he? Or, Barack Obama or whatever. But there's not just two sides to what's going on. There's a whole bunch of different issues going on and a whole bunch of different players no one hardly ever considers. And it would be really nice if our national media would maybe cover stuff like this in far more detail. Now, I'm not saying that it's not covered. I'm just saying that a lot of aspects of these issues are not covered really deep enough, in my opinion. That's just my opinion, but it just seems to me like, there's things more important than knowing what, Joseph Smith's alleged wives look like, okay? That's just my opinion, though. Maybe it's earth-shattering news. I don't know. But I would like to quote Noam Chomsky here. Had him on an interview a while back. And so you can look at my YouTube station where he was talking about American exceptionalism. and really fits it. Nothing's really changed. America, always says we wear the white hats. Speaking of media, it is kind of interesting though that there was an article. Look up on Google and type in Pentagon, Terminator, and UK Mirror. I think it was in the UK Mirror. And you'll get a very interesting article on how Hollywood is actually influenced by the U.S. government. So, but not to deal with that right now. Now, Chomsky, in a really classic interview, it's listed as excerpts from Manufacturing Consent. It's a combination, actually, I should say, of interviews. And if you look up Manufacturing Consent, Noam Chomsky, 1992 on Google, it'll take you here. He's asked a question here about how the media works in America, and he answers. It's basically what he's talking about here is it's basically an institutional analysis of the major media, what we call a propaganda model. We're talking primarily about the national media, those media that sort of set a general agenda that others more or less adhere to the extent that they even pay much attention to national or international affairs. Now, the elite media, continuing here, are sort of the agenda-setting media. That means the New York Times, the Washington Post, the major television channels, and so on. They set the general framework. Local media, more or less, adapt to their structure. And they do this in all sorts of ways, by selection of topics, by distribution of concerns, by emphasis and framing of issues, by filtering of information, by bounding of debate within certain limits. They determine, they select, they shape, they control, they restrict in order to serve the interest of dominant elite groups in the society. That's almost a paraphrase of what Edward Bernays said in his classic work, Propaganda, also on the internet if you want to read it. Edward Bernays' Propaganda, in which he states that most people's opinions are shaped by people they've never heard of. Okay? Even hairstyles, clothing styles, makeup styles, fertility decisions, all of these things are ultimately carefully controlled by the elite interest in society. Now, there is a certain level of competition you might have between certain business interests. But now here's where we get into an interesting point. And here's where I believe there's a difference between conspiracies and general agenda setting. And that is this. If we consider the fact that, when we're talking about the 1%, okay, the 1% of society that kind of owns everything, kind of controls everything, that particular percent of the population is they're able to pull the strings, since we really only have 6 major media that control almost everything we read and watch at movies and see on the news. Okay? And I feel that is extremely interesting in the sense that most people are not even aware of this. I mean, they're not even aware of the fact that even when you buy a novel put out by a large publishing house, it may actually be, owned by something bigger, which is owned by something bigger, which is owned by one of these 6. Okay? And that's a lot of control. But now, the people that control these things, they generally are not a diffused population. Okay? They go to the same schools. They go to the same social events. If you watch that, People Like Us, it's really illustrative. The upper class, they have different interest, taste, customs. It's almost like they're a different country than the regular people. And amongst the regular people, there's different classes as well. And those classes usually, it's not necessarily that it's totally a issue of economics, okay? There's socio-cultural things. The people that go to organic food stores tend to have a certain social cultural norm base. And if you look at, for instance, the ads that are up at a natural food store, you'll notice that they're different than if you just go to a regular grocery store, or where the billboard might have things going on that would be of interest to just the general community. And the thing is that the people who run things, and then the managerial class, the people that are on the top, like let's say newspaper editors, top reporters and anchor people, they are the ones who basically, their kids, or they may have gone to the same kind of universities, belong to the same fraternities. Why do you think people join fraternities and sororities in the first place? Yeah, the movies always make it sound like, well, it's a great way to meet people and have sex or something like that. Ultimately, the people join fraternities and sororities in order to make good connections with their future lives. Okay? I mean, I think they're probably still important too, even though we do have, Facebook and stuff like that. People keep up with each other. But I think a lot of people that maybe aren't upper class have realized through using social media that there's a value in keeping connected to each other, and a value to, that could come in all kinds of things. And, it might be job opportunities, it might be educational opportunities, it might be romantic opportunities. But again, this social circle, most people will fit into certain areas and they'll have their own norms and values. If I'm a vegan, I'm going to probably hang around a lot of other vegans, because obviously it's kind of hard to go out to pizza with a vegan. Okay? I mean, so the vegans, they go out to pizza, obviously, but they go to places that would serve vegan food. And so the thing is that, the people that are vegan, eventually they start forming their own little ideas about, and norms and customs, which might differ from if you had, well, speaking of Joseph Smith, a Mormon youth group, where there's going to be certain customs amongst those people. And you might have a difference where maybe you have some politically active young Republican group or something. They're going to have their particular norms and values too. Now, that's on a microcosm level, but if you look at the big picture, you're going to realize that the people who are up there, the elite, the opinion shapers out in society, they don't have to have a meeting and have a vote or a consensus on some social policy or what is best for America. Yes, there are organizations that do this kind of thing, okay, where people discuss things. They have the Council of Foreign Relations, Bilderberg, these kinds of groups that discuss issues and have a great deal of influence, ultimately. But the people that form these classes, where maybe there's an opera, opera. If I say opera, most people that are working class are have never been to an opera, okay? Have never been to these kinds of, events. It's just not part of the thing that you do. You weren't raised to do that. But anyway, the people you'll find in an opera in a major city in the United States, like Los Angeles or New York, or on Broadway, something on Broadway, are going to have a certain set of norms and values. Now, these are the people, ultimately, that are probably the ones who are writing the newspaper columns, who are choosing the topics, who are stating their opinions, who are framing the issues a certain way. Because they too want to fit in. They too want to advance in their careers and so forth. So they kind of know it's an unwritten set of rules ultimately. It doesn't have to be a conspiracy, in the traditional sense. It can just be that this is what these people believe, and this is kind of the norms that go out. Okay? And for someone to write something or deal with issues that are, maybe writing a whole series of columns about, I don't know, how wonderful Putin is or something. Something that would actually be, yay, Putin, he's a great guy, and then write all the good things he's done and how he's done this and this and this to try to preserve the environment, or maybe his perspective in regards to foreign relations. That would almost be akin to, I don't know, showing up at a rodeo in, traditional hippie attire, or going, I don't know, find a church picnic in a park and throw on a thong bikini and go sunbathing in the middle of it. It just would seem like, though, you just don't do those kinds of things. And so the one thing, Chomsky, a lot of these quotes are from the early 90s, which is kind of ironic because there was a way more media diversity in that era than there is today. We have lots of choices out there, it seems, but very few choice givers because they're all owned by the same companies. But the one thing you have to say is at least the internet has opened things up. Now, I'm going to say something here. Now, everyone listening to this has the ability to be a newsmaker themselves. No, I'm not saying go out and do something and wind up on the local news. What I'm saying is, why not just write your own blog and get it out there? And what if it only reaches, I don't know, 6 people a day? And sometimes that would be actually pretty good. But let's say you reach 5 or 6 people a day with your blog. Or do some YouTube videos, and maybe your average hits are about 20 per video. You're still doing something, and you're still reaching people. And the thing that's interesting, I think the thing that really threatens traditional media more than anything else, is they've always been the gatekeepers. All right? They've always been the ones who've been able to, this is the direction our country's going. We're determining it. We might have some discussion, but ultimately we're going for it. It's like the Iraq War. You had liberal media that kind of took the stand of, should we go and invade Iraq now, or should we wait till later? You had other media that was conservative. Well, we need to get this going and finish the job. You didn't really have a lot of media in America before the Iraq War that questioned the whole thing. All right, at least of the big media, and this is why they feel very threatened, because the idea is that do you really want a guy who lives in a trailer in West Virginia who actually has a YouTube station that he reaches a large audience with his perspective on various issues? Okay, I remember in college when, and this is before the internet, I remember in college when a professor, he stated the reason why this works well to just have the elite in charge of things is because it'd be like going to a football game in which you have team Democrats and team Republicans facing off with each other, and only the people that are chosen by their parties would be chosen as players to play against each other. Chaos would take place, if everyone in the audience suddenly jumped in to help their team when things weren't looking so good for their team. And this is the way the elite kind of look at it. They don't want you in there. They don't want you, they don't want regular people out there really reaching large audiences. Now, the thing that's interesting is, first of all, we have a population that has been designed to really not take part, has been designed not to really take an active role. And it's kind of interesting. I'm even thinking about how school is. You know, you had your student body, which was mostly, you know, the popular kids. They run their little fun election. They don't really have a lot to say in the way the schools run. But ultimately, you learn this is the popular kids. They do their political stuff, and everyone else just kind of goes to class, goes to a football game, that sort of thing. And then later, there's not a huge emphasis on really taking active role in politics, unless you happen to go in to some programs, preferably in, you know, one of the traditional universities, that's going to emphasize it, almost make it a duty that you have some say in the society. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because it's time to break that. If we have a population of people in which maybe 10, 15% are really aware, and I mean that in the sense that whether they be left-wing or right-wing, they know way more than what's just on the evening, you know, whatever news program or whatever is going on. They're a little bit more informed. They're often single interest people. They may be informed because gun control is their big issue, or abortion, or any number of other issues is what got them excited to get involved. Now, the thing is, much of the rest of the population only has trivial information in order to make decisions on. Think about if we had everybody who, let's just say everyone that listens to this show, or whether it's on the radio or on YouTube, if everybody that listens to the show were to say, I'm going to set up my own YouTube channel, I'm going to set up a blog, and go from there, and try to inform people. Again, you may not be big. You might not you probably won't reach Drudge Report proportions, or Glenn Beck, or Alex Jones, or any of these kinds of people. But you're still reaching some people, and maybe you'll get someone to think. If a small percentage of the population really became super aware to where they're questioning, then you get what's called the dissonant effect, and that was studied back in the it was back in the 70s. And with that, you found that if someone questions something, often, very often, it pulls more people just because someone questions. Because most people just want to go along with the flow. That's part of human nature. We're tribal. But if you question, then that gets people to change. And that's what I'd like to leave you with here. Just see what you can do maybe to start going out there and promoting more questioning. You know, and don't just complain about the weather and complain about politics, but go out there and try to change the politics. You're not going to be able to change the weather, but on politics you can. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope you'll be back next week, and you take care now. You hear? Bye now.
Truth on the Tracks you can catch every Monday night and Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.